When many of us arrive in community or city, we look around and we see what exists. Sometimes there are ghosts of what used to be, but rarely is there any sense of how things came to be the way they are. Often, the narrative of the city tells only part of the story or misses it completely. The video that we're sharing with you tonight is a tiny section of the vast stories of the people and places that have shaped who we are today as a community. Our people have struggled hard and long to hold on to this place we call home. Our roots run deep. These roots have informed how we live, grow, and thrive in spite of the hurdles along the way. We hope that we live up to the bold action that Mike Henson describes and the wisdom words of Dorothy Darton. My name is Fanny Johnson, and I have advocated for affordable housing, shelter, and support for this community for many decades.
Drop-In Center began in 1973 in a one-room storefront at 1711 Vine Street. As people experiencing homelessness grew, we moved to a 5-room place at 1324 Main in 1974. In spring of 1976, the community was angered when a decision was made without our input to close the drop-in. Our people could freeze to death out on the streets or in abandoned buildings. So we organized as the Shelter House Volunteer Group and kept the shelter open with all volunteer labor. By now, we were feeling the crunch of overcrowdedness. The landlord refused to do needed repairs. We could not see surviving another winter in this run-down place. We needed a bigger, warmer, and drier place. The former Teamsters Union Hall at 217 West 12th Street was our dream site. The Teamsters took a turtle's pace, negotiating a rental lease agreement with us. Feeling the moral urgency to escape this unsafe environment, we plotted the people's move for midnight, January 13th, 1978. We did not plan for the blizzard. What a blessing in disguise. It gave us time to settle in before the city discovered we were there. The city waged a vicious campaign to close us down. On January 20th, we were forced into court, threatened with immediate eviction and criminal charges. That frigid day, with 14 inches of snow on the ground, the 120 residents of the shelter were anxiously waiting their fate, as Buddy, on the witness stand, defended our decision to illegally move into our new home. Judge Alcott ruled in Drop-In's favor. It was a victory for the people that day. I am Bonnie Newmeyer. I participated and helped plan the people's move with Buddy Gray and the Residents Organizing Committee.
Buddy had gotten this building that we're in right now, and the city wouldn't let him move into this building. So Buddy had asked a lot of us if we would help him move, and I remember Buddy said, "Would you help us move?" And I said, "Sure, when?" And he said, "I'll call you. Don't call me, I'll call you." And one snowy night, I got a call from Buddy at home, and he said, "It's time." And so I came on over, and a lot of other people were already there. And with our cars and trucks, we moved everything that we could move out of the old building into this building. And then we came back and started loading folks in. Many people had been sleeping through a lot of the move or didn't know exactly what was going on. And so the very last thing we did was to wake everybody up, moved them all over here. And we did that in a remarkable short period of time. And what that did was to kind of allow that old rule of thumb, possession is 9/10 of the law, to be tested because the drop-in center was here. Despite the fact that the city and the developers and the politicians didn't want it to be here, it was here.
The midnight move was so bold, and that was the great thing about Buddy. It was bold. We were told that this was not an okay place to be, that it was not going to be approved by the city health department or whoever, and who were perfectly glad to close the old place down, which was horribly inadequate, rather than allow us to make this move. We made it anyway. And I think that's a model for, I think, how we all need to be. If I regret anything in my life, it's been when I haven't been bold enough to make the move. But he was always there. He always made that move.
The Recovery Hotel at 1225 Vine Street opened in February 1996. It's housing for graduates of local recovery programs. There was staunch opposition to this project, many fearing it would blight the community. In this piece, you learn about the process of purchasing the building. You see footage of people, power that dug the basement to meet the required ceiling height. You will see images of the 20-year anniversary celebrated in 2016. And you will hear from me, Donald Whitehead. I was one of the original residents of Recovery Hotel, along with Jimmy Heath and Ed Deering. In my speech at the 20-year anniversary, I referenced the poem Harlem by Langston Hughes. In this poem, Hughes asked the question, what happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun? Or does it fester like a sore and then run? I said that I know what happens to dreams deferred. They go to special places like the Recovery Hotel, and they wait for the dreamers to arrive.
These guys who owned this, Eukelson and Eukelson, were two doctors, and they had this building a long time, and they never, when the codes required indoor plumbing, never did it, so they vacated it in the early 70s. And we never found them. We bought it through some middleman guy who died and never had the full clear deed. So finally I found these two doctors. They're like late 80s, early 90s. They live in a kibbutz in Israel. We got the deed written in Hebrew, signed to the Tel Aviv consulate for $12,500 from these two guys. And their one remaining living relative in the United States, a 93-year-old lady, came and presented at the closing. It was a great deal. But it took 5 years of finding the people because they were going to demolish the building.
We go out and clean out the building. They can see that the work is being done. The sweat equity is being done. It's just the, like I said, the political side, or whichever way you want to put it, it's not being handled right towards the, low and moderate, people. And I think it's time that they see just what is being done and give us a helping hand.
At the Recovery Hotel, there were 4 people who were there, me and 3 other guys. And Buddy would ride past every night, and he would say, stay out of the window. And I never knew why he said that, why he would always drive by and do that. But he knew that the things that were going on at that time and Over-the-Rhine outside of the window were things that would cause some detrimental consequences to the guys in the building. So he wanted us to know that he was watching. And if we just focused on what was inside, maybe it was reading the material for our 12-step program or watching a movie or just reading a book in general, it would help us stay clean. And part of my speech that I didn't get to say was I bet Buddy's in heaven, and Charlie and Jimmy Heath and Ed Deering live on the same street, and Buddy rides by every night and says, stay out of the window. So.
This is a powerful story of dedicated people saving a vacant historic building for affordable housing at 1300 Vine Street. There was a fire in this building in 1992 after we spent money on a roof and secured it for future renovation. The fire brought a portion of the building down. The city wanted to demolish the whole building. We were determined to save it. You will see footage of the heroic community effort to take apart brick by brick and rebuild it back together. You will see images from the day that we renamed the building in memory of Buddy Gray in 1997, and images of the building today. The building is home to 20 people just out of homelessness. The ground floor is currently occupied by the Miami Center for Community Engagement in Over-the-Rhine, who did the renovation of their space. I am Jen Summers, former Restock Coordinator and current Director at Peasley Neighborhood Center. I, along with our beloved community, saved what we proudly call Buddy's Place.
When that first cold spell hit, 2 homeless men pried their way into the building, sleeping in there like a lot of older men still sleep in buildings even though there's a shelter. Privacy, aloneness, whatever, We're sleeping in here, and to keep warm, they started a fire and just gutted it because we'd already torn a lot of the plaster off of the ceilings in the gut job, and it burned it out. So then we tore this down, and just a mammoth amount of work, hundreds of people, human hours of people. The crane removed the big part, and then we stacked 13,000 bricks.
We are out here every day, taking our lives in our hands and working hard.
And it has been shown that we have been doing as much as we can. We're fighting night and day, tears, sweat for the neighborhoods and the community.
Hi, my name is Roger Auer, and I'm the board chair of Over-the-Rhine Community Housing. And I was the board chair of Restock when we purchased our Elm Street properties way back in 1985, when the drop-in center bought the parking lot to expand the shelter. The owner would not sell it unless we also purchased his other 16 apartment buildings. Most were vacant except for the Folda. With the help of many friends and supporters giving us loans and grants, we had to raise $850,000 in a very short time to close the deal. This opportunity doubled our housing assets and a much-needed expansion for the drop-in. Eventually, 2 of the buildings were sold to Habitat for Humanity for affordable home ownership. We developed a senior building at 1500 Elm. In this piece, you will see footage of Buddy touring folks through the Folda. You will hear from Elm Street resident Joe Wynn and Folda resident Steve Coyle. Steve initiated the tradition of the Christmas tree in the Folda courtyard that is carried on today by resident Dr. Bob Donovan.
The Folda was our first target because it wasn't as run down, still had plumbing and wiring. It was our best building, and it's a fully occupied building, done entirely by church groups. 16 apartments in there, and each one was adopted by a church group. We're going to go in and see one. I hope she didn't go out today, it's just unbearable. Ethel was a friend of mine I've known 20 years, and I found her over at the Huntley Apartments, last living person in the Huntley, which they evicted all the people here to 100 units, and she got into this building. Look at this gorgeous stuff that we're out. See, one of the guys in the morning tour said, so you guys, he was trying to figure us out. It was his first tour with anything like this. And he said, so you guys are like preservationists, I guess, huh? I said, well, we preserve more things than they do. Hi. Can we steal in for a minute? Can we come in for a minute?
Sure, come right on in.
This is Ethel Thomas.
How long have you been here, Ethel?
I moved in here the 10th of December 1992.
Oh, great.
This apartment was done by St. Michael's of Sharonville.
Sharonville?
Went to the drop-in center and participated in their recovery program. And during that time, I began to understand how to appreciate relationships, you know, and I guess that's where the seed was sown, you know, and it grew from there. The first housing I got after that was through Over-the-Rhine. It was restocked then. They gave me my first, and I think I've been in their housing ever since, you know, and that was about 12 years ago, you know. I've got to know people and gave people an opportunity to know me, you know, and I just love the community. You know, I got a lot of friends here.
I came to Cincinnati in 1994, and I've been in Over-the-Rhine ever since. I went to the drop-in center, I went to a recovery hotel, then I've been at the Folda ever since. So I've been to Folda 15 years.
Whoa.
So, but all with Over-the-Rhine Community Housing, which was restocked before. And what they've done for me, and I think, is give you a place to live and a safe place to live.
The Jimmy Heath House at 219 Odeon Street opened in December 2010. It's a 25-unit permanent supportive housing project for people who experience chronic homelessness. This segment opens with Jimmy Heath sharing some of his story. When Jimmy arrived at the drop-in center in 1992, our hope was to keep him alive. Jimmy did more than stay alive, he came to life. He rediscovered his love of photography and became the community photographer and opened the Over-the-Rhine Center for Photography at Peaslee. Jimmy died in 2007. His body bore out after living years on the street. We named the building after Jimmy to honor his legacy and to make a commitment to keep people alive and to support them as they come back to life. My name is Andy Hutzel. I, along with a persistent group of people, helped create the Jimmy Heath House to honor Jimmy's legacy of never giving up on anyone and to always include the most vulnerable people in our community.
I was very much alone. And I think part of that was my desire to be dead. And to do that alone would be the best way to do that. The emptiness begot a life that was empty and isolated. I conducted my daily business by myself. I didn't talk to anyone. I didn't get next to anyone. That particular day when I walked in the drop-in center, somebody reached out to me and said, hey, maybe we can help you out. I really wanted to be a photographer, but it never worked until I found a connection between the photography and my own spirit.
I think it feeds his soul. There's something there that he's still working with, knowing what he got and what he gives. And that's where he's finding it. When the children see the photos, something that they see every day, and the way that his photography honors the lived experience. Our people struggle with having a lot of folks devalue them all the time, but to have someone capture ordinary daily things and be able to frame it in a way that honors them and their experience, I think is a gift.
It's also the best part of the work that I do is being able to talk to kids and just see how receptive they are. They might not always agree with me, but they are listening, and that's really just amazing to me.
The Miami University Center for Community Engagement in Over-the-Rhine opened in 2002. It is the result of Tom Dutton's long-standing relationship with us dating back to 1981 with community leaders and organizations of our people's movement. Over that time, many students and faculty from Miami University have worked and walked alongside of us to assist in advancing our justice movement's efforts. The residency program started in 2006. Through this model of participatory and experiential learning and a semester living here, students' lives are transformed and our lives are enriched. In this piece, you will hear from Tom and resident June Alexander. June spoke about Tom at his memorial service at the center in June of 2017. Both June and Tom are part of our Over-the-Rhine family roots. The center continues to grow us new limbs and budding leaves. What is learned here is carried with the students wherever they land.
The fact that there's been an effort to build community for the last 40 years, represented by the Over-the-Rhine People's Movement. The challenge put forward by the community is seek out those most oppressed, most vulnerable, so that we may learn how to live.
Tom always reminded me of a tall tree that holds the sun. Not everybody can catch the sun. And when I heard him the first time, there were three things that he did for me. The first thing was when we were at the Highlander, he talked about how weary this work can make you. And I was there for a long time. Jen Aarons, wherever she is in here, she said when she met me, and a lot of people knew, I was down. Because I was at the point where, are we ever going to make it through this hell of this journey? And Tom, this man, standing like a tall tree, could bend in the storm and still stand back straight. He gave me, the first thing he did for me was give me the permission to be human. This little light of mine, Tom helped me find. And the second thing was when he was standing at the gentrification teach-in And what he did, he didn't tell somebody else's story. He didn't point, he told the truth on people who look like him. Do you know how powerful that is? Because people, I'm going to say it, you know, a whole lot of white people, as nice as they can be, they will go around that mess. You ain't going to tell it on yourself. Tom stood up there and he told it.
Yes.
He told the truth.
Yes.
He gave me permission to stand in the truth.
Yes.
And the third thing he did was he made me laugh. Every time he come in, I say, hey Tom, hey Tom, hey Tom, hey Tom. And he made me laugh yesterday. After all the sadness, I just started laughing. Because thinking of everything Tom did, there was these people in my head, don't analyze that, who were telling me, do you realize there are moments when this man forgets he's white? He only knows he's human.
Yes.
That is the most powerful thing you can do. This comes and it goes, all of it. And if you don't use it wisely, you just wasted all our time. But Tom stood in the truth and the light, knowing the storms are going to bend every limb he had. And he gave me permission to say, it's all right. This little light of mine, Tom helped me find.
My name is Mary Burke Rivers. The Milner Hotel acquisition and demolition was a turning point for me. I had become more engaged in advocacy through my experiences as the housing specialist at the Hamilton County Department of Human Services. Even then, there was a scarcity of housing options. The Milner provided both permanent housing and temporary housing. The Milner was a resource for family homeless shelters and the County Children's Services Division. Families experiencing homelessness would stay at the hotel until other options became available. On May 20th, 1994, a city-ordered wrecking ball carried out its fatal blow to the Milner Hotel. Its 115 units were destroyed on Garfield Place, making way for upscale housing, Greenwich on the Park. What I learned from the Milner was that political promises to get to the affordable housing piece later, or the promise of replacement housing, or the promise of mixed-income housing are repeatedly empty promises. Justice and equity don't come about without a fight. Community control of housing guarantees affordability. In this piece, you will hear from Reverend Maurice McCracken. He's often referred to as the conscience of our city. He speaks here at the Milner Hotel demolition.
Someone asked, well, what good does something like this do? You can't ask that first. We should ask first, is it right or wrong, the thing that's being done? If we speculate too much about the results, well, then we can talk ourselves out of doing anything. But history shows that the people have power, they recognize that power, and they exercise it. So let's continue to irrigate the whole political system so we'll have justice and freedom and hope for everyone.
In the summer of 1988, I was an intern with Restock. On July 14th of that year, we participated in a national day of action called Take Off the Boards. Advocates across the country were taking the boards off and occupying city and HUD-owned buildings to set them free. Too many people were suffering on the streets without housing while government-owned buildings sat idle. You will see clips from the 1988 Day of Action organized locally by the Greater Cincinnati Homeless Coalition and our Housing Now movement. In Cincinnati, advocates took the boards off of a city-owned building at 1109 Spring Street. I was proud to be part of that day, witnessing the bold, strategic use of civil disobedience.
They tore the wood off an abandoned building, some working, others singing, "Take off the boards." It was an act of civil disobedience. More than 100 protesters angry over this this nation and this city's crisis of homelessness. In Cincinnati alone, activists say there are 400 boarded-up buildings which could be rehabbed but just sit there.
We're here to make a statement that we're not going to tolerate lack of housing anymore, on any level, federally or locally.
This has to be a start. July 14th has to be a start. We've got to go the opposite direction we've been going for 8 years. We've got to restore housing so the 1949 pledge of a decent home for all Americans becomes a reality as immediately as possible.
Rob, activists for the homeless broke into this building today, what they call a symbolic gesture, to try to bring attention to the plight of the homeless both in this community and across the country. And they're still here, even though they have won a symbolic and a practical victory from their protest, which began earlier today.
Representatives of the group went to Mayor Charles Lucan and asked for possession of the building. He agreed to champion their cause before council and help get financing for renovation.
I hope in the 50 to 60 cities around the country where this happened, similarly, we've made a statement for the homeless, and this is the beginning of a march forward for the homeless.
Now, Mayor Lucan says that the deed still has to be transferred by council, but he believes they're supporting council to do that. He also wants the group to begin renovation of the building immediately, and that doesn't seem to be a problem. The people here said that they plan to start on Saturday morning the renovation, and they're asking for volunteers to help and asking also for donations of building supplies. I'm John Lomax reporting live for Eyewitness 12 News in Over-the-Rhine.
People putting their bodies on the line for the cause of affordable housing. Today, that building is owned by Otrch and provides 6 units of affordable housing.
And now we close this video with the wisdom words of Dorothy Darden and Nanny Hingston.
It's about being a truth seeker, standing up for injustice, speaking out when we're afraid, being cantankerous about what's really going on, being willing to step out of your comfort zone, being willing to do stuff for us that can make us whole.
We have tried to save the housing. The low-income people we have worked together to plant trees, but they are not listening to us because they think that we are trying to keep the neighborhood as a low-income community. But that is wrong. We want to see development, but we don't want to be pushed out.